Hi students, I wanted to take a moment for those of you who are needing some help with sentence outlining to just do a quick tutorial video where I go over where I actually outline some sentences right here on your screen. So let's take a look at this sentence. Now, I'm doing this on the computer. Obviously, you're going to be doing this by hand, so it's a little bit different how I approach it on the computer than how I approach it on hand, because on the computer I can just simply hit the enter key and it paragraphs. So when you're doing these by hand, the most important thing is to kind of figure out ahead of time is how you're going to be doing your placement and your indenting. So what I like to do first is just find my independent clause. So let's take a look at this sentence. James Gallion had driven 5 miles out of Fairbanks when he spotted the hitchhiker standing in the snow beside the road, thumb raised high, shivering in the gray Alaskan dawn. All right, so my independent clause is right here. James Gallion had driven 5 miles out of Fairbanks. What that does, since that's the only independent clause in the sentence, it tells me that every other thing outside of this is all modifying either something inside the independent clause or modifying something in another modifier. So everything else is acting as a modifier. So what I'm going to start doing now is just break this thing up according to the structures in here. And again, just like I asked you to do on the test, I'm going to break it up according to punctuation. So I'm going to do this in order. You always do it in order. You don't just start with the independent clause. This one starts with the independent clause, but it does so because the independent clause literally comes first in the sentence. So James Gallion had driven 5 miles out of Fairbanks, and I'm going to label it. All right. Do a couple spaces. Now I'm going to move on to the next structure. Just go to my next comma. When he spotted the hitchhiker standing in the snow beside the road. There's my next structure. Now, I need to ask myself, what is this modifying in this sentence? Okay. Is it modifying something in my independent clause, or is it modifying something in another modifier? Because that'll tell me how much I need to indent. So when he spotted the hitchhiker standing in the snow is telling us essentially when James Gallion had driven 5 miles. When is a when word, obviously, so it's an adverb. So I know it's modifying something in the independent clause, so I'm going to indent one space from the independent clause. If my independent clause is cinched all the way up against the margin, a modifier of the independent clause is going to be indented one space from the margin. I'm just going to paste that in there. When he spotted the hitchhiker standing in the snow beside the road. So now I'm just going to label it. When he spotted the hitchhiker, I've already decided there's a subject-verb pair. He spotted. When is telling me is a when word, so this is an adverb clause. Modifying when James Gallion had driven. There you go. All right. Do a couple more spaces for my next part. Thumb raised high is the next little bit here. Now I'm going to ask myself, what is this modifying in this sentence? Whose thumb raising? So we're talking about the hitchhiker. So here I've got a modifier, not modifying anything in the independent clause, but modifying something in the modifier before it. So I'm going to indent it one space from the modifier. So it's 2 spaces out from the margin. Thumb raised high. I'm going to identify that. That's one of those absolute phrases because it's missing a linking verb to make it into a complete thought. Absolute phrase. And absolute phrases modify the entire clause. Okay, so it's modifying I'm just going to write the previous clause, because that's what I'm not going to copy all that down. So remember, absolute phrases modify the entire clause they're attached to. He spotted the hitchhiker standing in the snow beside the road, thumb raised high. It's modifying all of that. And the last one, shivering in the gray Alaskan dawn. That is telling me more about what? Who was doing the shivering? It's going to be the hitchhiker. So it's going to be indented just like this previous phrase. I'm going to skip a couple lines. Shivering in the gray Alaskan dawn. That starts with an ing verbal. So this is a participle. Participial phrase. Participial phrases. Whoops. Participial phrases are always adjectives, so they're always modifying a noun, and I've already identified it's modifying hitchhiker. All right. So there is my sentence outline, just like that. Okay, I've written the sentence out in order, and I've just kind of indented it according to what it's modifying. Since here's my independent clause all the way to the left, this is modifying the independent clause, so it's indented one space. These two are both modifying things in this modifier, so they're indented two spaces, and I just identify what they are and what they modify. All right, so here's another sentence. This one is a little more periodic than the previous one, so our independent clause doesn't come first. Let's read it. On the northern margin of the Alaska Range, just before the hulking escarpments of Denali and its satellites surrender to the low Kantishna Plain, a series of lesser ridges known as the Outer Ranges sprawls across the flats like a rumpled blanket on an unmade bed. I love John Krakauer. That's awesome stuff. So once again, I'm going to identify my independent clause. There it is right there. And then I'm just going to break up the sentence part by part according to the punctuation. So let's start first with on the northern margin of the Alaska Range. Let me remove my annoying paragraph breaks. There we go. All right, on the northern margin of the Alaska Range. Now, I pasted that too soon. Now, what is that doing in this sentence? It's modifying something. What exactly is on the northern margin of the Alaskan Range? Well, we're talking about a series of lesser ridges. So this is modifying something in the independent clause, so I'm going to indent it one space. Okay, and then I'm going to identify it. There we go, just like that. All right, so that's my first little element there. A prepositional phrase modifying series on the northern margin of the Alaska Range. Next, just before the hulking escarpments of Denali and its satellites surrender to the low Kantishna Plain. That's my next element. Okay, so what is that modifying? It's once again telling me more about where these lesser ridges are. Let's see. Yeah, it's telling me more about where the lesser ridges are. So let's indent it the same space. It's modifying something in the independent clause. All right. What kind of structure do we have here? We have an adverb, just, but this isn't really an adverb clause. It's just a little modifying word. The head word is actually before. This is another prepositional phrase. Oops. And I said it was a directional preposition phrase. It's telling us where. That's the job of an adverb, so it's going to modify a verb. I need to go back and correct this one. Let's see. It's telling us more about where a series sprawls. And in fact, I'm also going to change this previous one. Prepositional phrase modifying where the series, there we go, the series sprawls. There, good. So all I'm doing is identifying the type of phrase, prepositional, and specifying what it modifies. Yeah, it's definitely modifying sprawls, not series. It's not telling us what kind of series, it's telling us where the series is, of course. I can't believe I messed that up. All right, next element is actually my independent clause. So that's going to be bumped all the way against the margin. Go and remove the underline. And that one's the easiest to identify in the, whoops. There you go. All right. Next, like a rumpled blanket on an unmade bed. How vivid. So, like a rumpled blanket on an unmade bed, what is that modifying? It's modifying how the lesser ridges sprawled. So it's adverbial once again. And like is a preposition here, so this is a prepositional phrase. How the series sprawls. There we go. And there's our sentence outline. Another 4 elements, just like that. Let's try one more. All right, here's one that's a little bit of a challenge. I like a good challenge. You should too. 20 miles or so due west of Healy, not far from the boundary of Denali National Park, a derelict bus, a blue and white 1940s vintage International from the Fairbanks City Transit System, rusts incongruously in the fireweed beside the Stampede Trail. All right, a lot of elements in there. Let's find our independent clause. A derelict bus rusts incongruously in the fireweed beside the Stampede Trail. Okay, we've got a little medial modifier here. We'll talk about how to deal with that here in just a minute. So let's start off at the beginning of the sentence. 20 or so miles due west of Healy. 20 or so miles due west of Healy. What is that doing in this sentence? It's telling us where the bus is currently rusting. It's told in the present tense, so it's kind of weird. So it's a where. Okay, it's a where phrase, so it's acting adverbially. Let me remove my paragraph spacing. There we go. So it's acting like an adverb. Now, 20 or so miles due west. Our head word here is west. That is the primary word that kind of defines what this phrase is. I could take away everything else and that would tell me still the direction we're talking about here. So west of Healy. This is an adverb phrase. I need to go and indent, don't I? Indent one space because it's modifying the independent clause. This is an adverb phrase. These aren't terribly common. They're not very common outside of just one word adverb phrases like however, furthermore, basically, still. You see those words starting the beginning of a sentence. Those are all single word adverb phrases. You don't often see a lengthy one like this one. So this is an adverb phrase modifying where the bus rusts. Excellent. All right. Not far from the boundary of Denali National Park. Okay. This is also telling us where the bus rusts. Let's see, is it telling us more about anything in here? Is it telling us more about this adverb? No, I think both of these are equal modifiers. I don't think this is modifying this. So let's put it on the same line, the same level, same indent, one space. And this, once again, is another adverb phrase. Two back to back. We're talking about far. West and far are both the direction words telling us where the bus rusts. So far is an adverb. That makes this phrase an adverb phrase. And I could have copied and pasted that, but I didn't. All right. Next we have the beginning of our independent clause. A derelict bus rusts incongruously in the fireweed beside the Stampede Trail. So I'm just going to copy the whole thing for now. That's my independent clause, so it goes all the way against the margin. I'll remove my line or my underline there. Now I've got a medial modifier. I've got to take that out. That can't stay in there. But since I took it out, I need to add in ellipses. Okay, and that's how you do that there. A derelict bus rusts incongruously in the fireweed beside the Stampede Trail. And that's my independent clause. And the last little thing, this medial modifier. A blue and white 1940s vintage International from the Fairbanks City Transit System. That's telling me more about bus. It's renaming bus. So it's modifying something in the independent clause, so I space it just one time. All right. And this is an appositive phrase. Renaming, bus. There. All right, that's my whole outline. I've just broken it up according to the punctuation. This one had a medial modifier. All I did was remove it from the independent clause, move it to the next line, and identify it just like it existed, after the clause. You never want to break up a clause that's interrupted with a medial modifier. You want that whole clause on the same line. I know a lot of you screwed that up on the test. You put like the subject, drama, and then down here you put the predicate or something like that. It's got to all go on the same line. So I hope this video was a little bit helpful. To practice this, really the only way to practice is just go out to the internet, find some sentences with a lot of modifiers, a lot of punctuated modifiers, and just break them up. Just outline them yourself. Bring them to me. I'll be happy to look at them for you. All right, I'll see you in class.